You are right about God. You are also wrong. Are we all correct about who and what God is? Yes, of course we are. Are we all wrong about who and what God is? I can say this with a high level of confidence. We definitely are. If I give you an empty jar and ask you to look inside and tell me what you see with your eyes, you will probably answer nothing. If I give you a magnifying glass and ask the same, you will probably say, I see a few hundred dust particles floating inside. If I give you a microscope, then you will probably say you see thousands of dust particles floating and hundreds or thousands of microbes on the wall of that jar. If I give you an electron microscope, you will see billions of atoms not only floating around, but also on the walls of that jar. This is what happens when people look at God. Some see nothing. Some see a few pieces of God. Others see an ever expanding, unknown, unlimited, infinite universe. Some see good. Some see neutrality. Some see wickedness. Some see love. Some see indifference. Others see evil. And it all depends on the lens used to see God. Welcome to my podcast, Thinking Unchained, the podcast that unchains your thinking. This is your host, Unchained Thinker, talking to you. You can visit my website, thinkingunchained.com, to comment or discuss today's episode. I'm glad you're here. Thank you. I am new to podcasting, and it seems shorter episodes do better than long ones for now. So I will divide this topic into two parts. In these next two episodes, I will attempt to present how I view God through my unique and individual lenses, and hopefully open your mind to the possibility we all have been both right and wrong about God's identity. I will also try to present the possibility God may have put us here on this earth to experience life, to acquire a view, and to then present that view, good and bad, back to this God. Notice I said good and bad, not good or bad. I mentioned in episode 1 we have many purposes. I believe one of those purposes is to create an opinion about God through our experiences and give that opinion back to that God now that we are alive or when we die. Every person on earth is right about who God is. Right about that minuscule part of God that person knows. By the way, people who don't believe in God are also correct. Each person's view of God, including people who don't believe in one, is valid. But that view is extremely limited. That view comes through personal lenses. Some have one lens, others have multiple lenses, but not a single person on earth has a view of God through every lens in existence. I know many, many questions arise. We all have them. Who is God? What is God? Is there a need for God? Why yes or why not? Can anything exist outside of God? This is a good one. I like this question. This is one question that puts religious people in a paradox. If the devil exists outside of God, then the devil is also a God. And now we have two gods. If the devil exists inside God, then the devil is simply a part of God. And I will have another episode about the devil. I'm not here pretending I know who or what God is. I am not here to change your mind. More importantly, I'm not here to tell you which God to believe in. First, let me begin by saying I will be using it when referring to God. Giving God a him, her, they, I feel boxes God into being rather than everything. The moment we provide that him, her, or they, we box them into a being instead of an everything. And I will present this later in my episode. We can view God from each religion's lens, But there are so many religions in the world, even this view has become blurred, out of focus, formless. This is evident even when you ask people from the same church who they believe God is. If you go to a church and you ask each person who they think God is, they may label this God with one single label. Oh, God is a parent, usually a father, and a him rather than a her. A friend, some will say God is all good and just simply answer it with God is all good. God is all knowing, maybe a ruler, a creator, etc. Of all the views of God, religion, in my opinion, offers the most narrow, and I dare to say, the most boring view of God. If we viewed God from a political lens, however, God will be a thin skinned dictator, a God who sends people who criticize him to hell, a punisher of those who oppose him, someone who demands adoration, obedience, demands gratitude, even during horrible life experiences or terrible situations, and more than anything else, demands loyalty. A God who pretends to give free will, but if you exercise that free will, then you are punished. A dictator who has supposedly written holy books about himself, presenting only one side about himself, discouraging us from finding out on our own his true identity, or even discouraging or punishing us if we expose his flaws. Maybe this is the reason many Christian religious people are attracted to dictators or leaders with dictator tendencies. A dictator resembles their God, especially the evangelical Christian Protestants. Pseudoscience has also an interesting way of presenting God. They usually present it as energy and frequencies, maybe a high intelligence alien or aliens, a software developer. You have probably come across some of these ideologies, or maybe even believe in one right now. And there is nothing wrong with that. I used to also believe that. I used to be involved in pseudoscience and believe that God was energy and frequencies and all of those things. Nothing wrong with that. We can view God from a philosophical view and still get a blurred vision, since philosophical ideologies usually mix scientific, religious, and cultural beliefs. There are so many philosophical figures of the past who presented their beautiful views of God. But one of my favorites is Philip Mainlander's view of God. He had an incredible lens, a suicidal lens, I need to warn you, believing God destroyed itself to give rise to the universe. This is brilliant. Killing God so that he can give rise to the universe. That's like a tree that dies and falls over to give rise to an immense variety of life. So it happens, right? In our nature. A tree falls over, dies, and it creates life for fungi, worms, insects, other plants. In order for life to begin, sometimes a tree must die. Very interesting, brilliant view of God by Philip Mainlander. We can view God from a scientific view. This includes medicine, the natural sciences, mathematical sciences. Now, seeing God from a mathematical perspective is very interesting and compelling. I really like the mathematical view of God, especially when studying infinity, such as pi and fractals and those other infinity values. However, even through the science lenses, we are presented with another blurred view of God. One of my favorite views in science is from John Archibald Wheeler's. So, this is Wheeler's theory of the self observing universe, a universe that created us to observe itself. I will be using both of these, Mainlander's and Wheeler's views, just because I find them most interesting, not because I am convinced they are the true presentations of God. Which one of all the views of God is the absolute truth? I will say none. Is any of those views closer to the truth than the others? I don't think so. They are all equally separated from the truth. They are just views of God from the same distance, but from different points of views, different angles, and viewed with different lenses. I repeat, I'm not here to convince anyone my view is correct. Honestly, if anyone has found who God is, and that gives that person spiritual peace, by all means, that person should continue to believe in that God and don't let anyone else, including me, change that. But also, what I ask is for religious people to stop trying to convince others to view God from their lenses. Stop trying to convert others to their beliefs. Stop pretending they know the true God. Nobody knows God. Nobody on earth knows God. I repeat, all we have are extremely blurred visions of God, every single one of us. We need to unchain our minds from thinking there is only one way to see God, though. I hope with today's episode, I am encouraging you, my listener, to find your unique, good and bad view of God. As I said in episode 1 and at the beginning of today's episode, keep in mind, you are looking at everything through lenses that are unique and very different from everyone else's. So remember that your lenses are unique. When you view at God, you're seeing God from your lens. You may see God as the best thing in this universe, or the worst thing in this universe, or that God is nothing at all. No matter what view you have, you are both correct and wrong. And that is a good thing. To know that not a single person on earth knows who God is or what God is, it is a great thing. Before I return to Mainlander and Wheeler, allow me a few minutes to talk about an interesting interaction between a character of the Bible and God. Whether you believe the Bible is the Word of God, a historical book, a fantasy book, maybe even a comedy book, there are parts of the Bible that are compelling due to the deep meaning of the messages or stories presented. For those of you who do not know the Bible, there is a character named Moses. I don't want to go too deep in the story. You can read the book of Exodus in the Bible for a deep dive. He was the son of a slave. But as a newborn baby, he was sent down the Nile River in a basket to save his life. The Pharaoh had ordered to have every newborn male from the Hebrews' families killed. The Pharaoh's daughter found the baby coming down the river, then took him to the palace and raised him. So Moses became a prince of Egypt. As a young adult, he killed an Egyptian guard who was physically abusing a slave. Of course, after killing this guard, he feared for his life. And what he did is he fled Egypt and lived in the desert for 40 years as a shepherd. Again, it is a long story, and I am limited on time. Most likely, Moses spent most of those 40 years in solitude, along with his sheep, maybe questioning, pondering, wondering, maybe about life, maybe about its purpose, the universe, maybe even God or gods. He probably believed in a bunch of gods. Who knows? The Bible doesn't mention what Moses' thoughts were in those moments he was alone in the desert. But very likely he spent a lot of time thinking. Supposedly, one day, God's voice came to him in a burning bush and gave him the purpose of liberating the people of Israel from slavery and from the oppression of the Egyptian Pharaoh. So there was a burning bush, and God's voice came from that bush and gave Moses purpose. Now, this is the part I find compelling, and I will be reading from the New International Version of the Bible in Exodus 3:13 through 15. It says, Moses said to God, This is Moses talking now. Suppose I go to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? I find this interesting. Moses referred to God as the God of your fathers. He did not believe this voice came from one of his gods. Remember, he still considered himself Egyptian and probably believed in many gods. So he called this talking God from the bush the God of your fathers. Now God said to Moses in 14, I am who I am. This is what you are going to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. I am who I am. Moses asked, when they asked, who do I sent me? God said, I am who I am. Why not give a name? Do you know why God didn't give a name? Most likely because this God is whoever you need him to be, or her, or it. In this case, the Israelites needed a liberator. So I am who I am, in this case, a liberator. After this, Moses returned to Egypt to liberate the people of Israel. But the Pharaoh resisted, as the story goes. God sent plagues and famine to the Egyptians, showed miracles, sent signs from the sky so that the people of Israel were liberated. Then, at the end, God kills the firstborn males of every Egyptian family. So much for a loving God. God killed those firstborns, and finally, the Pharaoh releases the Israelites and lets them live with Moses as the guide and leader. Now, many miracles happen on the way to that quote unquote promised land, with the most famous, of course, being the parting of the Dead Sea. God parted the Dead Sea so the Israelites could cross to the other side. You can read about this event in the book of Exodus in the Bible. Again, it's a long story. Other miracles happen, such as God sent bread and meat from heaven. A column of fire was followed the people at night for warmth, and a cloud covered the sun along the way during the day for cooling. So there were a lot of miracles happening even on the way to the promised land. Then an even more compelling interaction happens later in the study. Moses, after seeing all of the miracles, talking to God in multiple occasions, seeing the Ten Commandments written with the finger of God, after all the interactions with God, and even after this verse. And I look at this verse in Exodus 33:11, New International Version. Exodus 33:11. The Lord spoke to Moses face to face as a man speaks with his friend. After all of this, Moses asked God to show him his glory. Moses wanted to know who God really was in its true form. He didn't want to see any more miracles and wonders. Moses had enough of them. He knew that if God created the universe, then parting the sea and all the other miracles and wonders were nothing to this God. And I will agree with that. If God created the universe, parting the sea is nothing. Why are Christian evangelicals so amazed by small miracles? Such as, I don't know, a traffic light turning green at the right moment? Shouldn't parting of the sea be considered something very normal and not something to be amazed by from a God who created the universe? Anyways, I digress. Moses now wanting to know the God who was doing the miracles and wonders, the God behind those, not those miracles and wonders. In Exodus 33:18 through 22, New International Version. Then Moses said, now, please show me your glory. So Moses is asking God to manifest himself or itself. So Moses wanted to see the presence of God, God himself. The Lord answered. And remember, this is after Moses had seen everything, has spoken to this God. After everything, he still wanted to know God. He didn't know him. Moses realized that. The Lord answered in 19, I will cause all of my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will announce my name, the Lord, so you can hear it. I will show kindness to anyone to whom I want to show kindness, and I will show mercy to anyone to whom I want to show mercy. But you cannot see my face, because no one can see me and live. In 21, there is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. 22, when my glory passes that place, I will put you in a large crack in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. And then lastly, it says, then I will take away my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen. Extremely interesting. So the man who has, according to this story, known God the closest was Moses. And even he could not see the true identity of God. Even the man who has known God the closest could not see the true identity. But now we have all of these religious leaders from every religion, but especially the Christians, pretending they know God. They do not. If anything, religious leaders are the ones who know God the least. They are the ones with the most blurred vision of God, the ones that are probably seeing it with the worst view. Join me in the next episode where I expand on Wheeler's self-observing universe, Mainlander's view of a God who committed suicide, and where I will present my own view of God. Thank you.